Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome everyone to the Ask the Experts Dynamics GP Fixed Assets webinar. My name is Brandon Cook and I will be doing just a few brief housekeeping notes before I hand it over to Estelle today. We are using GoToWebinar today. If you guys have any questions throughout the webinar, feel free to drop those under the questions panel on the right side of the screen. We will be answering questions as we go today, so if you have anything during the webinar, feel free to ask. Today's webinar is being recorded and it will be available on our new Longevity resources page. You can find all of our webinars, recordings, and upcoming events on that resources page. So if you have some time afterwards, feel free to go check it out and see all the great stuff that we have on there. All right, before I hand it over to Estelle, I'll go ahead and read our Longevity mission statement. Our mission statement is at the core of everything we do here at Longevity, and we try to install that in everything we do here. Our mission is to improve the life and success of our partners and customers by providing exceptional business application experiences that simplify, inform, and delight. And with that, I'll hand it over to our presenter for today, Ms. Estelle Varner.
Okay. First off, I want to be sure, can everyone see my screen?
I can see it, Estelle.
Okay. All right. Let's go on. Okay, so I'm doing this webinar a little different than I've done some of the others. I don't have as much prepared because I want to be sure I am focusing on the areas that you're interested in. So looking at our people that are attending, I know one person has some experience with fixed assets, but I don't know the amount of experience the other users. So as you look at this screen and I show you some of the things that I've kind of thought that we could cover in this session, I would really appreciate right now if you could type into the questions or anything what you would like me to focus on. If you may mention in it you have zero experience, or I'm really experienced but I'm having problems with this area, or I need some hints on setting up, or I don't understand certain aspects of it. And if you let me know, then what I'll do is tailor this session to that feedback. So if you wouldn't mind, please taking a little bit of time typing that in, and then Brandon will let me know what you have to share. I'll give you a few minutes to do that. If I don't hear from anything, then I'll just start talking about fixed assets, and who knows if I'll touch on what you need. I should have some interim music playing too.
All right, so looks we have some responses here. We have one attendee who says, I'm pretty much self-taught on the fixed assets module. We have been using it since 2016. I just am now learning the basics, so any smart ways to use it or set it up would be great. I do struggle with running additions and deletions reports.
Okay. And when you say additions and deletions, do you mean adding new assets or deleting existing assets? Or it says additions and deletions reports? So getting fixed asset information out in your reports?
So it's just running reports to list the additions and deletions.
Okay. Okay. All right. So let me feel like give a little bit of an overview of some very general setup things and some work in the cards that leads to, you know, once you have all the assets and there's changes that need to be made, and then how to get that information out. And also when I have this discuss various fixed asset settings as they affect your assets, what I'm thinking when I say that is I'm thinking along the line of your asset groups and your asset classes. When I'm talking about understanding settings as they affect your calculations, that's where I'm thinking about, okay, your choices when you make choose your depreciation method, or your let me think what that's called, the depreciation methods and our averaging conventions. Okay, so let me just bring up GP and open up my setup menu a little bit. If you've already been using GP a while, this may or fixed assets a while, this may all be done and you're not looking to make any changes. Or if you were self-taught and you feel like, well, maybe I could do it a little bit more efficiently or make it work a little better so that the information that I get on my balance sheet makes more sense. So I just wanted to discuss a little bit about account groups and classes and all. When you create account groups, a lot of times what people typically think of is, okay, what you see in your balance sheet, your furniture and fixtures, your leasehold improvements, equipment, vehicles, and kind of that very general breakdown. And all, and which is fine. And usually in the account group, that's all you need, unless you happen to have multiple departments and you have equipment for, say, the state of North Carolina versus equipment for the state of Virginia, because you have a separate account number for those two states. Maybe you would need two separate groups, but typically most people just kind of, okay, have one account for equipment. So then that comes down to the fact, well, then why can't I just take the account group and say I want, based on that account group equipment, I want to set it up so that I can run the depreciation. Why do I need the class in addition to that? And just so that you're thinking about it, if you have equipment, maybe you have under the group class of equipment, you have equipment that depreciates for 5 years, maybe some of the equipment depreciates for 7 years, maybe only depreciates for 3 years. So that's when you end up needing a further breakdown. You still want all of those various depreciation years of equipment to go to the same equipment asset account and the same equipment depreciation account, but you need it distinguished by the number of years. And that's what the class will allow you to do. Is if you don't have all of that, then you could have just one, or you could create a class that's equipment - 3 years, equipment - 5 years, and that can help. I have a client that needs to break down even further, and they have equipment 5 years North Carolina, equipment 5 years Virginia, and all because of having different account numbers. So once you have that extra split by having the class, then when you come to your book class setup, you can determine, well, let's clear this, and choose an internal book, which is what most people have, and say equipment. And now I can choose this equipment. Well, if I had equipment dash 5 years, I could have my setup that tells me what the depreciation for the 5 years is, what the averaging convention put in the 5 years life, that save that, set up equipment dash 7 years and have the setup. And that way, all of the depreciation and everything will run as you would hope it would run, automatically in GP, calculated across the years. The other thing I see a lot of people when they're first starting out, if they don't have a CPA that's telling them, well, use depreciation method, straight line, original life, and depreciate it over the full period, or start your depreciation the month after you buy it, or the quarter after you buy it. And also you get, if you don't have someone telling you that, you get here and you see, I don't know, there's so many things to choose from. I'm not a fixed asset expert, so what do I choose? There's so many averaging conventions to choose from. What do I choose? So I just wanted to show you this, and I believe it's on my, I believe I put it on my PowerPoint as how to get here. So if you want the PowerPoint, it's a very short one. I can share it with you. But I would just say, if you ever need a fresh reference as to what these mean, go to your help menu when you're in this book class setup screen, about this window. Oh, my help menu came up on my other screen. Here we go. And then click on creating a book class record. And under here, notice we've got some blue depreciation methods and averaging conventions. And if you click on either one of these, it gives you a good definition of what each one of these is, so that you have a little bit of assistance as far as what's going to happen. If I choose half year, when does the asset begin to depreciate? When will it end depreciating? And, and so on. If I choose next month or full month, what is going to happen? So I like these explanations, but I need to refresh my memory. Okay, so that's the thing that I picked out of this setup that I thought would be nice to cover. So I'm going to now switch gears, and I'm going to go into where you spend a lot of your time with fixed assets. Is your day in, day out, you're under cards, you're in your general and your book screen. So this is where you're going to see your existing assets or add assets. If you are a beginner and you're here because you're thinking about adding fixed assets, or you have been using it but you've always kept maybe a spreadsheet of assets you haven't brought in, and you want to bring them in, and you just haven't brought them in because maybe there's so many of them, and it just seems so much work to bring in assets one by one. There is an import template, and I'm not going to show that to you. I just wanted to mention it. The import process in fixed assets is much more, how do I put this, much more detailed and specific than a lot of the other importing capabilities in other parts of GP. The template has to be just exactly so, and there's a lot of preliminary setup that has to be done first. So I would just say that, yes, there is an import tool if you weren't sure of that and wanted to know that, but I would advise that part of it, you use a partner or a consultant to help you bring that in. I can share an import template with you, but all the little tricks and bells and whistles to make it work, I would suggest using a partner to bring in a lot of new assets at once. If we wanted to look and the assets will fill in our general information screen. We can also import the book information. You can, if you're tracking insurance and lease and user-defined fields, there's imports for all of these different windows under cards. It's just that most people are only paying attention to the general and the book. And so let me just mention let me pull up an existing asset. So a typical general screen will look like this. We've got our asset ID. It belongs to the furniture class. Even though this is not filled in, for some reason, I can't even explain the thought process behind this. When you first set up an asset and you choose class ID, the account group will fill in, but as soon as you save the window, the account group disappears. It doesn't mean it doesn't know it's what account group it belongs to, but it is there. So all of this is pretty self-explanatory, the things you fill in, the date you bought it, the cost of it, how many, and if say you're adding it today, even though you bought the asset 2 months ago, you might put in the day that it was added. And when you go from here, you're going to, as another part of the adding, because I chose class and the class has an account group assigned to it, I'm gonna, if I click on account, I can see all my account information is automatically filled in because of my setup. So I see that happening. And if when I've added my asset, I had this auto add book information, it will also automatically fill in starter information for the book. So if I go to internal, you're going to see information as it exists now. If it had been a brand new asset, which I will do next, then you'll see kind of starter information. So let me clear this. And I just want to point out, if you have not turned on, if you're using it, this will be familiar to you, but if you have not turned on in setup an integration between accounts payable and fixed assets, I would recommend it. When you first come into this screen, if you don't have that turned on, or if there is nothing that you purchased in accounts payable that uses the account number that is a trigger, there is an account number that you set up and say, if I use this account number in accounts payable or in the purchasing module, that tells fixed assets that I'm buying an asset. And when that happens, after you post that transaction, when you come into this screen, the first field you see is purchases. If I hadn't had any purchases or I was starting from scratch, this purchase field would not even, you wouldn't see this. But as it happens, I have an asset that was purchased. And so I can look at it right here. I can click on the purchase button and I can see the item that was purchased on a purchase order. In this case, it might have been on a payables transaction, but on a purchase order, I had selected an item. So I'm just going to say, okay, if I select that item, now that I've purchased it, I see that it's here, I need to complete the setup in fixed assets. So I'm going to select it. And what GP does is, from the information in that original screen, the payable screen or the purchasing screen, it fills in the description, it fills in the dollar amount, the acquisition date, the quantity, and everything. So all I need to do is select a number, and I'm just going to plug in a number here. And I can add more description if I want. I need to put in my class. So what is this? This is a shoulder rest. So not really an asset, but I'm going to use it anyway. So I'm going to call it equipment and see how it fills in my account group. It's going to go to machinery and equipment. I have my auto add book information here. So if I like everything here, then all I need to do is save it. And notice this is one of the screens in GP after you hit save that it doesn't go away. It's because it assumes that after you save it, you're also going to want to double check that the account information came in. And if I want to, I can go to the book, and based on internal, you can see it was placed and serviced based on the acquisition date. It hasn't been depreciated yet. It's going to tell me how much it'll depreciate. It's only going to depreciate, it looks like, oh, this is the salvage value. So it's not even going to tell me what it'll depreciate. It'll probably be pennies for it to take 7 years to depreciate.
Estelle, looks like we have a question.
Okay.
Is there a way to auto have this I don't know how to say it, AUDO auto have the second screen under the acquisition cost open in an expanded mode, or do you have to select and expand the button each time?
I'm sorry. Let me make sure I understand. To auto, where this all automatically fills in, or that I had to choose the purchases? Or
yeah, it was, the question was talking about the cost open in an expanded mode, or do you have to select and expand the button each time?
Okay. If I'm understanding right, what I've found is that because I've selected it, I don't have any more purchases, so my purchases button has gone away. But if I'm understanding the question correctly, I found that I like to click on the purchases button to kind of see more information. And if you're talking about expanded mode, where I had to click on a button so that I could see more lines, by default, it doesn't have an expanded, and there isn't a way for it to be automatically in that expanded mode. But if you were asking to bring it in from that, I find I like clicking on the purchases button to look at the information to be sure that I want to bring it in. And then I use the purchases drop down to actually bring it in. It seems to work more consistently and all if I use that purchases drop down to bring it in, but I see more information if I click on the purchases button. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, we had a follow-up. It says it was under the acquisition cost, right arrow on this screen, and it opens the second screen.
Oh, I see. Okay. So are you talking about this showing more information right here, where you can see the vendor ID and all of that? And unfortunately, if this is what you were talking about, that no, it by default, it's always going to go in this high details mode. And that seems, you've probably seen that in a lot of various fields in GP, that it comes in this this kind of high details version. I believe the GP Online version shows more information than the default, the standard GP, which is what I'm in. So if you're using GP Online and you don't have the expanded version, but you have it in other screens, you might put that in a request of making that improvement or that change so that it will come by default in the open version. We have more control over the GP Online and how you see it than we have on the standard GP version. So, okay. So I've added this. You can see it automatically brought in the book, but when I look at it, honestly, it's kind of ridiculous. Why would I track a $22 item for 5 different items over a 7-year period? So someone mentioned about deleting. Notice this is one of the few screens in GP, one of the few master screens when you think about, you know, vendors and customers and inventory and accounts. When you first add something, if you realize you made a mistake, there's a delete button and you can delete it. Well, there is no delete button in fixed assets. And they make it very difficult to delete, and I guess that's because they want to make sure that you don't delete an asset either unintentionally or if there's been any activity. If you've done any depreciation, set up any information to it, you really should not delete it. You should do more like a routine to retire the asset. But if you're in this situation, you just put in a brand new asset and it's not right and you want to get rid of it, the only choice you have is you need to go to utilities, and it may depend on your security settings what you have, but notice there is a delete button that they hide under utilities where I could put in that asset, and I'd have to look it up. I know I started with a 1. I thought it was with the 1. All right, let me find my asset again. Go to Cards, General, and find my asset. I thought I saved it. I thought I saved it, but let me put in another asset. Okay, let me take a look at my asset numbers. 59. 1, 2, 3, 5, 9. And I'm going to assign this to equipment. And I'll just call this miscellaneous. And I'm going to put this in at today's date, which in this system is 4/12/2017. I'm going to make it at 200. Let's see, and I'm not going to assign anything else. I'm going to auto add. So I'm going to save this. So I should see that I've got account and book information. All right, I've done this much. Let's see if I can find my asset now in my delete. Let's go to utilities. 1, 2, 3, 5, 9. Says it's active. It gives you a warning right here. Using this utility may violate the integrity of your data. It really scares you. And one of the reasons that it scares you like this is because with this utility, it doesn't go out to check if you've already posted and stop you from deleting it. In other parts of GP, you know, if you try to delete an account and it will tell you there's history here, you can't delete this account. You try to delete a vendor, no, you have activity, you can't delete that vendor unless you do some steps to clear history. here, this is a utility that will just delete it no matter what. So it's warning you that if you have already posted cost or depreciation, it's going to just wipe it out, and there's nothing that's going to hit the general ledger to offset those entries that you've already done. So in this case, I know I haven't done anything to hit the general ledger, so I'm going to go ahead and delete this asset. And it's going to ask me again, am I sure? And I'll continue that. And then I get a report. It tells me the information, what the cost basis, and everything here. I've had to use, the only time I've used this utility is if I've imported assets and found after the import that some mistake was made in the data. You know, we haven't done anything yet other than add the assets, so we delete them and start again. And I would not recommend this, but since someone specifically asked about deleting, I mentioned they hide it here. Do not delete it if you've already run any transactions. Instead, retire an asset. All right. One thing I'll mention after cards, I'll go into transactions. A lot of times people don't think about that there's an actual transactions or transaction type activity that you can do with fixed assets. And what that usually amounts to is what I mentioned, retiring an asset, or maybe you need to make a change to an asset. And sometimes when you need to make those changes, you notice there's a mass change, a mass retire. There's a single retire, a single transfer that you can make, but there's also, maybe you put a whole group and they're moving all their assets to a different state and you want to move them, then you want to do them in mass. There's also times where I have people ask about, well, I would like to run depreciation on just a certain group of assets. I'm not ready to do them all yet. Or I just want to run a projection on just the assets from a particular location because I need to make a budget for next year. How do I get it? Because when if you've been using fixed assets at all, you know that you can depreciate just one asset or you can depreciate all of the assets. How do you depreciate just some of the assets? And that's where the transaction menu select assets comes into play. And I have one example here where I went in and I created a group and based on the location, and notice that it's only in this group, only the assets for Atlanta are marked. I called it my Atlanta assets. And I'm going to show you how to create a group. Now let's create a new group and let's call it, let's do just equipment. MNT. All right, trying to find good initials and say OK. And when it looks like it empties it out, but if I click on my group, I see all of them. Now I could, if I didn't have a lot of assets, just kind of go down the line and manually click on the equipment. But there is a way where you can maybe, if you have a lot of items, have GP help you find them. So if you've got your new group highlighted, click on search, and let's say equipment would probably be under my class. So I'm going to say is equal to equipment. I could also say, well, equipment in Atlanta. So I could have an additional one. Property type, is it new, real? Is it my assets that are in my federal ID, my federal book, or my internal book? Assets that are only placed in service after a certain date. So there's various ways, various combinations I could make to create my group. But in this case, all I want is, let's see if I can clear that out. All I want is this. So hopefully, let me delete that. And I'm going to just hit my enter button. It goes through, and I messed that up because of putting that second line. So let me delete the group and start again. New group, EQMNT. Do this really quick. Search. And do class ID is equal to equipment. I'm not going to do anything in the second line, and I'm going to hit my enter button. You see it creates a group. Well, the reason, now why did I go through the work for doing this? The reason for doing this is I'm going to say, okay, now if I needed to retire all the assets in that group, maybe you've got a bunch you need to get rid of, you can take that group and mass retire based on my group that I created. But the real magic of it, I guess, is if you call it magic, if you go to routines and you need to run a projection or you want to depreciate just that group, I can click on depreciate, and notice it always defaults to depreciate all my assets. If I uncheck that, I can now select this group and run depreciation for just my equipment. Let me show you if you're not familiar with projections. I'm going to click on projection, and let's just depreciate this equipment. And I am going to, let's see, my date is 4/12/2017, so I'm going to depreciate out for a couple years. So I'm going to put a projection target date of 31/19, which is a couple years in this system. And I just want it for the internal. So you have to click on it here on this side and hit projection. It just tells you it'll be performed. Yes, I want to continue. If you have a lot of assets, you're going to see the progress bar. Here, I don't even have that many assets, and you see it isn't a super quick, I guess, when you think about it for just a few assets. But when you think about it, I also projected out for a couple years. If I had projected out for maybe only a month or so, it probably would not take as long to run the projection. Now, where do you see that information? You see it ran it, but there's no reports. So I'm going to go to my reports and go to projection. And there's a couple reports here. Well, detailer summary based on the period. I just actually worked with another client yesterday on this because she needed the projection to work up a budget for her next year. So we ran the projection out until the end of her next year. And I'll look at the annual detail so that you can see what shows up here. And let's do project from, let's do 12/31/19. And I'm not going to put any restriction in here. I wanted to make sure it was going to the screen, which it is, and I'm going to click print. And what I wanted to point out is even though I did not put any restriction in here to indicate that I wanted just equipment, because I ran the projection on equipment, then the projection report can only give you the information on what you ran the projection for. So if you need a projection for all assets, you need to run the projection for all assets. If I was to go back into my projection and run a projection for just one asset, then I would lose the report for all of this information. So you kind of get a one-time chance on your projection report. Run the projection, look at the report. Run a new projection, you get a different report. You can't save it. Of course, you can send this report to a file or a PDF and save it that way, but GP does not save various projections. And because I projected out to 2019, I see the information for each year. This is an annual one, so it's giving me a summary amount for each year. What was nice on the one that I worked on yesterday is that client's, their fiscal year does not start until April 1st. But we ran the projection yesterday until March 30th of her following year. And what it provided on the report was a line that said pre-projection, because it knows that there's going to be a couple months of depreciating before April 1st, and then a separate line for her year, so she could get her budget amount that she needed without having to decipher how much of it was the current year and how much of it is the actual year she was looking for her budget. If I switch this to, I only want this for 2018, let's do this, then it's going to use that same projection information. And here it's calling 2017 the pre-projection, and then has 2018. That is the annual form. Well, what if you need to be able to say, well, how much of it is going to hit every month, because my budget is on a monthly basis? I'll go ahead and save that. You get a detailed report, and you kind of have the same options here on what you want to select. I'm going to remove this, and let me make this to 1231, and I'll make it a little shorter, otherwise the report will be really long. So I'll do 12/31/17. I just want it for a few months. And here you get a report that tells you how much is going to be depreciated on the assets for every period. And you could use that. So it didn't, by running the projection, it doesn't depreciate, it doesn't actually update or change anything on your asset. It's just giving you an idea of what will happen when you run depreciation. Let me see. Reports on activity. I'm going to experiment a little bit here, and I've just put an X there. And let's do retired assets. Internal, we'll do all assets. Let's look at what this report does. This is giving me detail of all activity that was done in the depreciation module. We've got if you know your abbreviations, we've got fixed asset depreciation, fixed asset change. This is a fixed asset retired. Now, if I had not marked the retire box, I wouldn't have seen this information. So when you asked about getting information on assets that have been deleted, if once you delete them, if you truly delete them using the utility, you're not going to see them on any kind of report. If you remove them based on retiring them, whether you retired them because you sold them or you just trashed them, or for whatever cause you may have indicated for it, you should be able to see those in these type of reports. You can, the property type, let me see, acquisition date, source document. I was playing around with in my system. This is not what you should see. I realized I had this problem just a half an hour before we started here, is you should be able to see source documents. So when I first printed this report and I saw that FARET meant retired, that's what I should see. I should see FA add, FA change, FA retire. In your system, you should see that. I've got to find out what's going on in mine. But that's one way you might be able to restrict a report and say, okay, I just want to see all my retired assets. And I could also, in addition to restricting it by the source, I could restrict it by acquisition date, place in service date, and maybe I'd get closer to getting the information that I need to know, or that you need to know. Detail activity, the FAADD is the fixed asset adds. So if you were looking at a detail activity report and restricted it to that particular source document, then you would see everything that was added, and you could put in a place in service date between 1/1/2020 to 12/31/2020, so that you get your activity for the year. Depending on what version of GP you're on, you may or may not get a year-end closing report. The latest versions have a year-end closing report that basically lists out all the additions and all the things that happened over the course of the year. You only get one time to print it, and unless you save it to PDF, you can't printing it anywhere in GP. But in earlier versions, there was no year-end closing report to fixed assets. And so as part of the year-end closing process, they always recommended come in and run your reports. So if you need an overview of what was added, go to your activity report. If you need an overview of what was depreciated over the course of the year, whether you need it in detail or a summarized version, then run your depreciation report. I'll have to, if you have a question as far as, well, which version has the year-end closing, I can't remember exactly which version they started implementing having the year-end closing report, but I can find that out if you want it.
So Estelle, we have a question regarding that, but we did have a follow-up from earlier that said, I just need additions and retirement reports for the fiscal year to provide to auditors. The retiring report for what? I'm sorry. I just need additions and retirement reports for the fiscal year to provide to auditors.
Okay. Okay. So for me, for additions and deletions, what are retirements, I would come here, and if you need a little bit more detail, you know, not just a generalized, I would come to this detail activity, and just to break it down, you can have, you know, if you don't put any assets in here, it's going to look at all assets. If you're looking for just the ones that have been retired, maybe just include a retired. And let me click on that, and you see I've got a much shorter report, and it's giving me the information as far as the asset, the quality, the cost basis of the asset, and the retired general journal entries that were put in. And maybe if you don't need that activity, I would look at the summary and see if it gives you just the basic information. As far as if you're looking at everything, you've included active and retired, then I would use, and I know that this should be an active field, because just yesterday when I was working with somebody else, we used the source document as our range restriction. And I would use the source document range restriction and insert it into here. So for example, if we're looking at this, the source document is this field. So if I want my ads, I'm going to choose a source document of FAADD. And if I only want ads on one report, do to and from this. And then, let's see, do you want ads? Okay, I maybe see what your, can't restrict it on your place in service date. You need to know when. Well, the place in service date would work for the ads, or the acquisition date would work for the ads. But for your retirement, a place in service date is a restriction is not going to help you, because, well, you could have bought it in 2017 and retired it in 2019. Current year, fixed asset year. Let's try this. Let's do 2017. And let's just, since I don't have my source document, I'm going to do this and print, and depreciated period per year. These were all things that were retired in 2017. If I change my year, I don't know how much activity is in my sample company, so I can't swear, although most of the activity is in 2017. Let's see if there's anything in any other year. Yep, no assets. So that tells me it really was restricting it to that year activity that happened. So I would try using a combination of your fixed asset year and that source document to indicate what was added in a particular year and what was deleted in a particular year. All right. So one thing I kind of glossed over here, and we're getting close to the end of the time here, and it's the key of the work when you actually run depreciation. If you haven't paid attention to these, you know, you've got your depreciation under routines and depreciate one asset, where you indicate one very specific asset and run it. Or you click on depreciate and you accept the default that you want to depreciate all assets, or if you want to depreciate just a group of assets. But once you make your selection and you say, I'm running the depreciation for my internal and I want it say I'm doing this for March for my current year. Once I have all of this information, I'm not going to click on this, but I hit depreciate. You're going to see the progress bar. And you're, again, just like the projection, you're not going to see any kind of report. You're not going to necessarily see any type of activity happen, and yet it was happening. What happens once you run the depreciation, it immediately updates your fixed assets module. It just has not updated anything in the general ledger because there's a separate step for the general ledger. But if you were to run depreciation and then go look at your assets, so if I go into cards and go into book and I bring up an asset, what I would immediately see is that my depreciated to date has updated to that date that I depreciated it to, and my year-to-date depreciation information has already been updated. So even though you didn't get a report when you ran depreciation, it did update your assets immediately. And also that work is done. The follow-up step that has to get it over to the general ledger, so I'm going to go back to routines, is under GL posting. And I see one of our attendees, we've had problems with her batch going through correctly, and I'm going to be looking at it further to see why her batches are having problems. But really, it should be a very straightforward method. You come into your GL posting window, you say, okay, I just ran depreciation for March 31st, so I'm gonna, and that's when I want it to post to my GL. Of course, I didn't actually run it, but let's say I had, and I can put in, fixed asset depreciation for March. And then I click on my process, and it's gonna bring up not only anything that was depreciated, but anything that since the last time you ran GL posting, it's going to bring up any additions, any changes, anything along that line. So I just noticed how close I am on time. So I will wind down here. If you have more questions about the GL posting, I'll be happy to help you kind of offline with the GL posting routine. Another thing that I did not touch on, and I just thought of this, if you have any questions, if you get to, in your cards menu, you ever get to a point where because of your book or a change that you made, you hit this warning that you've changed a depreciation sensitive field, please select one of these following choices, and you're not sure what to choose. I can give you a little bit more information about these three choices or how to find that information. There's information under help and all that will give you a better definition so that you know what to choose. I would suggest before making any changes to be aware of these and which one is the correct one to choose, because you're not going to get a chance to go, oh, well, wait a minute, let me look this up. You've got to make the selection right then and there. So know what these selections mean before you make any changes to your book. I appreciate your attendance. I really wasn't sure I'd have enough information, and here I just filled up the whole hour. If you have any questions and you want to stay on for a minute, I'm welcome to put in any of those questions. Otherwise, just let me know if you need any follow-up information. I'll turn the time over to Brandon.
All right. So if you guys would like a copy of this webinar or want to rewatch it, I am going to upload it to the Longevity website on the resources page. It'll be available. If you go to longevity.com, go into resources, it'll be available there. Or you can reach out to info@longevity.com and it asks that you can have a link sent to you, and I can send the link to the page when it's up to you directly as well. So that's going to be it for today. If you guys want to check out our resources page again, see some of our upcoming events, there's a lot of great stuff coming up. So we always appreciate you guys taking time in your day to hang out with us and learn some new GP.
Yes. Yes, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Bye.